I still remember the sound of that voicemail. Not because of what the man said, but because of how calm he sounded. You have 48 hours to come back, Tessa. After that, nobody can help you. Then he hung up. No yelling. No threats. Just certainty. And sometimes, certainty is much scarier than anger. Because it means the person on the other end already believes they own your future. My dear friends, if you've ever had someone try to control your life, then tonight's story may stay with you for a long time. Because this is the story of a woman who drove into a scrapyard full of Hell's Angels bikers. And somehow ended up saving herself. And maybe saving them, too. Her name was Claire Bennett. She was 32 years old. She had $3,000 in savings, a cracked phone, and a Honda Civic that rattled every time she drove faster than 60 miles an hour. She also had a secret. She was running. Not from the police. Not from debt. Not even from poverty. She was running from a man named Grant Holloway. For 3 years, Grant had controlled almost every corner of her life. He knew where she worked. He knew her passwords. He knew which friends she still talked to. And somehow, he always knew where she was. The worst part? Nobody else saw it. To everyone else, Grant was charming. Professional. Successful. The kind of man who shook your hand with both of his and remembered your birthday. People liked him. People trusted him. Which meant every time Claire tried to explain why she was afraid, she sounded unreasonable. Eventually she stopped trying. Then one night she looked in the bathroom mirror and realized something terrifying. She couldn't remember the last time she'd made a decision that belonged entirely to her. Not one. That was the night she left. She packed a duffel bag. Took the cash she had secretly saved. Turned off her apartment lights. And drove. North. No destination. No plan. Just away. She drove for almost 11 hours. At a gas station outside Bakersfield, she found an old flyer pinned beside a broken vending machine. It read, "Office help wanted. Iron Haven Auto Salvage. Long hours. Hard work, ***. Ask for Jack Mercer." Someone had scribbled underneath in black marker. "Nobody lasts here." Claire almost laughed. At that point, "nobody lasts here" sounded safer than going home. So she followed the directions. An hour later she turned onto a gravel road and saw the scrapyard. Mountains of rusted metal. Stacks of old engines. Rows of abandoned vehicles. And men. Big men. Leather vests. Tattoos. Gray beards. Faces that looked like they had survived more than one war. A small patch on several of those vests made her stomach tighten. Hell's Angels. She almost put the car back in reverse. Almost. But the gas gauge was nearly empty. And fear had become exhausting. So she parked. Sat behind the steering wheel. And counted to 30. Then she got out. The morning air smelled like motor oil and old rain. Nobody greeted her. Nobody stared. Nobody even seemed interested. Strangely. That made her feel safer. She walked to the office. The screen door creaked. A man stepped out. He looked to be about 60. Tall. Broad shoulders. Gray beard. Deep scar running along one cheek. The kind of man who didn't waste words. He looked at her for several seconds. Then said, "You lost?" Claire swallowed. "No, sir. I heard you're hiring." The man glanced toward her car. Then back at her. "You ever work in a scrapyard?" "No." "Know anything about engines?" "No." "Then why are you here?" For a moment, she almost lied. Instead, she told the truth. Because I need somewhere to start over. Silence. The man kept looking at her. Finally he nodded toward the office. Come inside. She followed him. Paper covered every surface. Boxes filled with files. Folders stacked everywhere. The place looked less like an office and more like a storm made of paperwork. The man reached into a cabinet. Pulled out a ring of keys. Then a broom. He set both on the counter. My name's Jack Mercer. Claire looked at the broom. He looked back at her. If you still want the job. He said quietly. Start with the corner behind the filing cabinet. And just like that. The most important chapter of her life began. Neither of them knew it yet. But in less than 3 days. The man she was running from would walk through those doors. And by then. Everything inside this scrapyard would be different. Claire swept the corner behind the filing cabinet like her life depended on it. In a strange way. It did. Dust gathered in gray lines across the concrete floor. Old receipts slipped out from under boxes. A rusted screwdriver rolled against her boot. She didn't ask where anything went. She simply watched. Jack Mercer sat behind the counter, drinking black coffee from a chipped mug, answering questions from men who came and went without explaining themselves. Some wore leather vests. Some didn't. All of them seemed to understand the yard's rhythm. A man with silver hair tied in a braid dropped off a stack of vehicle intake forms. Another man with tattooed hands asked about a missing transmission. A younger biker leaned against the doorway, glanced at Claire, then said to Jack. She's staying? Jack didn't look up. She's sweeping. That was all. No welcome. No warning. No judgment. By noon, Claire had finished the corner, emptied 3 boxes, and found enough misplaced paperwork to understand one thing clearly. Iron Haven wasn't just messy. It was vulnerable. Permits mixed with receipts. Inventory logs missing dates. Environmental forms buried under parts invoices. A place like this could survive rust, oil, and weather. But bad paperwork? Bad paperwork could shut it down. Claire picked up a yellow legal pad and began writing. Jack noticed. What are you doing? Making a list. Of what? She looked at the papers. Everything that could hurt you if the wrong person walked through that door. For the first time that morning, Jack Mercer stopped drinking his coffee. Jack spent the next 20 minutes reading Claire's notes. Then he read them again. You found all this, in one morning? Claire nodded. There are invoices that don't match inventory records. 3 environmental inspections are missing signatures. Some vehicle titles are filed under the wrong years. She hesitated. And your business license renewal is due in 10 days. Silence. A big man with tattooed forearms walked into the office carrying an alternator. What died? Jack handed him the yellow pad. The man frowned as he read. Then he looked at Claire. You figure all this out already? I used to work in operations management. The man let out a low whistle. What happened to that job? The question hit harder than it should have. Claire looked away. I needed a fresh start. Nobody pushed further. Jack finally stood. Name's Rafe Calder. He held out his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm but careful. Can you fix this mess? Claire looked around the office. Papers. Boxes. Old receipts. Years of chaos. Not today. Rafe almost smiled. But eventually? She took a breath. Yes. For the first time since arriving at Iron Haven, she saw something unexpected. Hope. Not in herself. In them. As if these men had been waiting for someone to walk in and make sense of everything. Then her phone buzzed. One text message. Unknown number. I know where you are. Claire went completely still. A second message arrived. You can't hide forever. The color drained from her face. Rafe noticed immediately. Claire. She locked the screen. Too late. Her hands were shaking. And for the first time since she reached the scrapyard, she realized Grant might already be looking for her. Claire barely slept that night. Every sound outside the small apartment above the office made her sit up. A truck door. A dog barking. Footsteps on gravel. Her hand kept reaching for her phone. No new messages. Still, she couldn't relax. At 6 in the morning, she went downstairs. Rafe was already there, drinking coffee. He looked up. You look terrible. I didn't sleep. He nodded, as if he already knew. Then he slid another mug across the table. You want to tell me what's going on? Claire wrapped both hands around the coffee. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered. I left someone. Rafe waited. He doesn't like being left. Silence. Did he hurt you? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. Rafe leaned back in his chair. You think he found you? She slowly nodded. Before he could speak, Jack walked into the office. One look at Claire's face and his expression changed. What happened? Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally Rafe said quietly. Somebody's looking for her. Jack didn't ask who. Didn't ask why. He simply looked toward the window. Then back at Claire. You're safe here. The words were simple. Almost ordinary. But Claire suddenly felt her throat tighten. Because nobody had said those words to her in a very long time. She looked down at her coffee. You don't even know me. Jack put on his work gloves. No. A pause. But I know fear when I see it. Then he opened the office door. And around here. He said calmly. We don't hand scared people back to whatever chased them. For the first time since leaving home. Claire believed she might not be alone anymore. By the end of the second day, Claire had turned one corner of the office into an actual workspace. Invoices were sorted. Titles were filed. Inspection reports sat neatly in labeled folders. Even Jack looked surprised. You did all this today? Claire nodded. I still have a long way to go. Rafe stepped inside carrying a box of old records. Then here's another 20 years of problems. She almost laughed. Almost. Then she froze. A document near the bottom of the box caught her eye. She pulled it out. Then another. And another. Her expression changed. What is it? Rafe asked. Claire laid the papers across the desk. These numbers don't match. Jack frowned. What numbers? The disposal records. She pointed to 2 forms. This shipment says it was processed in Nevada. She pointed to another. But this permit only allows disposal in California. Silence. She turned another page. And the company listed here. She paused. It doesn't exist anymore. Rafe leaned over her shoulder. You sure? Very. She looked at both men. If someone audits this place, you'll spend months trying to explain it. Jack's face darkened. We never touched those records. I believe you. She looked at the stack again. But somebody did. The office became quiet. Then, from outside, came the sound of tires on gravel. A black SUV had just pulled into the scrapyard. Nobody recognized it. Nobody. Except Claire. The color disappeared from her face. Because she knew that vehicle. She had sat in it hundreds of times. Grant had found her. And he was already getting out of the driver's seat. Nobody moved. Grant stepped out of the SUV wearing jeans and a navy jacket. He looked perfectly normal. Perfectly respectable. The kind of man who could sell you insurance or coach Little League. That was always the frightening part. Monsters rarely look like monsters. Claire took a step backward. Rafe noticed. So did Jack. Grant smiled the moment he saw her. There you are. His voice was warm. Almost affectionate. You had everyone worried. Claire didn't answer. He walked closer. I've been looking everywhere for you. Still nothing. Then he finally noticed the two men standing beside her. And you are? Jack folded his arms. People who work here. Grant laughed softly. Well, this is all a misunderstanding. Claire and I had an argument. He looked at her. Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home. Sweetheart. The word made her stomach turn. For years, he had used soft words like chains. She shook her head. No. Grant blinked. As if he hadn't heard correctly. What? I'm not going with you. Silence. A long one. Then his smile returned. Tessa. The wrong name. She hadn't told anyone here her old nickname. Rafe noticed that too. Grant took another step. You aren't thinking clearly. Claire's hands began to shake. But this time. She didn't step backward. I am thinking clearly. For the first time, the warmth disappeared from his face. He looked at her. Really looked at her. And understood something he had never expected. She was no longer alone. Then his eyes drifted to the office. To the stacks of paperwork. To the files spread across the desk. Something changed. A flicker. Recognition. Interest. And suddenly Claire understood. Grant hadn't come only for her. He had seen something else. Something he might be able to use. Grant's smile returned. But now Claire knew the difference. This wasn't affection. It was calculation. He looked at the documents on the desk again. Then at Jack. You run this place? Jack nodded once. Grant reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. I'm a compliance consultant. Claire's heart sank. Because he wasn't. Not exactly. Grant had spent years learning regulations and corporate law. He knew how to find weaknesses. And he knew how to use them. He handed the card to Jack. I couldn't help noticing your paperwork situation. Nobody said anything. Grant continued. This place could have serious legal problems. Rafe's expression darkened. You done talking? Grant ignored him. He looked directly at Claire. I think we should leave now. No. The answer came faster this time. A muscle jumped in Grant's jaw. Then he smiled again. All right. He put his hands in his pockets. But I should mention something. He nodded toward the office. If state inspectors saw those records, this entire operation could be shut down. Silence. You have missing permits. Inconsistent disposal reports. Incorrect filings. Jack's face hardened. Grant smiled. I'd hate to see good people lose everything. Claire suddenly understood. He wasn't here to drag her home. He was here to remind her of something. Every place she cared about could become a target. And now Iron Haven was in his sights. She felt cold. Very cold. Because for the first time since arriving, she wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid she had brought danger to the only place that had opened its doors to her. Grant finally left. The black SUV disappeared down the gravel road. Nobody in the office spoke. Claire stared out the window. I should go. Jack looked at her. What? He found me because I came here. If I stay, he'll keep coming back. Rafe folded his arms. So your plan is to run again? She didn't answer. Because that had always been the plan. Leave. Start over. Leave again. Eventually there would be nowhere left to go. Jack sat down slowly. Sit. She did. He pushed the stack of questionable records toward her. You found these. She nodded. You understand them. Another nod. Then he said something unexpected. We need you. Claire looked up. Rafe leaned against the door. We've been running this place for 20 years, he said. Engines, parts, customers, we know all that. He tapped the paperwork. This? We don't. Silence. For the first time in a very long while, someone wasn't trying to save her. They were asking for her help. Not because they pitied her. Because she mattered. Rafe pulled out a chair and sat across from her. If that guy's right, somebody's been tampering with our records. Claire looked at the documents again. The numbers. The missing permits. The fake disposal company. Then suddenly she saw it. A pattern. 3 invoices. Same billing address. Different company names. She grabbed a pen. No. Jack frowned. What? She pointed at the papers. These businesses don't exist anymore. Another page. Another address. And then she understood. Someone had created fake companies. To move money through the scrapyard's records. She slowly looked up. This isn't sloppy bookkeeping. The room went quiet. It's fraud. And whoever had done it was still counting on nobody noticing. The office lights stayed on long after sunset. Invoices covered the desk. Folders were spread across the floor. Coffee cups were everywhere. Claire sat cross-legged beside a filing cabinet, staring at a ledger. Then she froze. I found him. Jack looked up. What? She turned the book around. Not who created the fake companies. Her finger stopped on a name. But who approved the payments? Rafe stepped closer. The signature belonged to a former employee. Derek Lawson. Jack frowned. Derek left 2 years ago. Exactly. Claire pointed to the dates. These payments continued after he left. Silence. So somebody kept using his authorization. She flipped another page. And look at this. Same mailing address. Same tax ID. Different company names. The fraud wasn't random. It was organized. Someone had been stealing money from Iron Haven for years. Rafe exhaled slowly. Can we prove it? Claire nodded. I think so. Then her phone rang. Everyone looked at it. Unknown number. She already knew who it was. She answered. Grant didn't even say hello. You've been busy. Her blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. A pause. Then he said quietly. Walk away from those records. Nobody in the room moved. Grant continued. Some things are bigger than you think. Claire looked at the papers scattered across the desk. Then at Jack. Then at Rafe. Are you threatening me? No. A long silence. I'm trying to protect you. Click. The line went dead. Nobody spoke. Because they all understood the same thing at exactly the same moment. Grant already knew about the fraud. And somehow, he knew they were getting close to the truth. The next morning, Grant came back. This time he didn't arrive alone. A man in a suit stepped out of the SUV carrying a briefcase. Another remained in the driver's seat. Grant smiled as though they were old friends. I thought we should talk. Jack stayed on the office porch. We're talking. The man in the suit handed over a business card. Environmental Compliance Division. Claire took a sharp breath. The card looked official. Too official. Grant looked at her. You should have listened. Then he turned to Jack. Unfortunately, there have been complaints regarding your records. Rafe's jaw tightened. What complaints? The man opened his briefcase. Before he could speak, Claire stepped forward. Can I see your identification? Everyone looked at her. The man hesitated. Only for a second. But she saw it. A tiny pause. Enough. He handed her the badge. She studied it. Then looked at the business card. Then the badge again. And suddenly. She smiled. The man frowned. Something funny? Claire handed the badge back. Actually, yes. She pointed to the card. The agency changed its logo last year. Silence. She pointed at the badge. And this ID number has one digit too many. Nobody moved. She looked directly at Grant. You didn't bring an inspector. A long pause. You brought someone pretending to be one. The color slowly drained from the man's face. Rafe took one step forward. Then another. Grant's smile disappeared. Claire's voice remained calm. If you wanted us scared, you should have checked the details first. The fake inspector quietly closed his briefcase. No one spoke. No one needed to. Because for the first time since arriving at Iron Haven, Claire wasn't the frightened woman running from her past. She was standing between danger and the people who had protected her. And she wasn't moving. Nobody moved. The fake inspector looked at Grant. Grant looked at Claire. For the first time since arriving at Iron Haven, he looked nervous. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and immediately silenced it. That was strange. Claire noticed. So did Rafe. A few seconds later, another vehicle pulled into the scrapyard. Then another. A county sheriff's SUV. Jack frowned. I wasn't expecting company. Neither was Grant. The sheriff stepped out carrying a folder. Jack Mercer? That's me. The sheriff nodded. We received a report this morning regarding possible financial fraud involving this business. Silence. Grant slowly smiled. Then the sheriff continued. The report also included documentation identifying the suspected companies involved. The smile disappeared. Claire frowned. What documentation? The sheriff opened the folder. Inside were copies of the same records she had found. Invoices. Addresses. Tax filings. All neatly organized. Then he said something unexpected. The package was delivered anonymously last night. Everyone looked at one another. Nobody had sent it. The sheriff turned another page. We traced one of the shell companies. He looked directly at Grant. It leads back to a consulting firm registered under your name. The world seemed to stop. Grant's face went white. No, that's impossible. The sheriff didn't blink. We also have records showing you advised those companies on regulatory matters. Claire stared at him. Suddenly everything made sense. The fake businesses. The missing money. The panic in his voice. Grant hadn't come to save her. He'd come because he was afraid. Afraid she would discover something. Afraid she would put the pieces together. The sheriff stepped closer. Mr. Holloway, I'd like you to come with us. Grant looked at Claire. Actually looked at her. Not with anger. Not with control. With disbelief. As if he couldn't understand how the woman who once apologized for everything was now the reason his entire scheme had collapsed. He opened his mouth. Then closed it again. A long silence settled over the scrapyard. Then the deputy gently took his arm. And for the first time in years, Claire watched Grant leave without feeling afraid. 3 months later, Iron Haven looked different. Not because the old cars were gone. Not because the rusty fences had been painted. But because the office no longer looked like a storm had passed through it. Folders sat neatly on shelves. Invoices were organized. Permits were framed and hanging on the wall. For the first time in years, Jack knew exactly where every piece of paper belonged. And according to the county auditor, Iron Haven had never been in better shape. The investigation uncovered nearly 6 years of fraud. Grant had created shell companies and funneled money through businesses that lacked proper bookkeeping. He never expected anyone at a scrapyard to notice. Then Claire arrived. A desperate woman with a suitcase and a broom. And everything changed. Grant eventually accepted a plea deal. The fake inspector testified against him. The stolen money could never be fully recovered. But Iron Haven survived. That mattered more. One afternoon, Claire stood outside the office holding her old phone. The same phone that once felt like a chain. For years she had jumped every time it rang. For years she checked it before sleeping. For years she feared what might be waiting on the other side of the screen. Now, it was just a phone. She opened a new inventory app and smiled. The device that once carried fear now held work schedules, supplier lists, and notes about engine parts. Her life had changed so quietly that she almost missed it. A truck door slammed somewhere in the yard. She didn't flinch. Someone walked across the gravel. She didn't freeze. The fear that had lived inside her for years was finally leaving. "You look different." She turned. Rafe stood beside her. "When did you get so good at sneaking up on people?" He smiled. "I've always been good at it." They stood in silence for a moment. The sun was setting behind the rows of old cars. Beautiful, in a strange sort of way. Rafe shoved his hands into his pockets. "You ever think about leaving?" Claire looked around the scrapyard. At the old office. At the workers laughing near the garage. At Jack arguing with a delivery driver. Then she looked back at him. "No." A small smile appeared on his face. "Good." Silence again. Then he said something that made her heart stop. "I don't think Iron Haven needs saving anymore." She looked at him. "I think it needs a manager." Claire laughed softly. "You offering me a job?" "No." He smiled. "I'm offering you a future." For a moment neither of them said anything. The evening breeze carried the smell of motor oil and rain. Then Claire realized something. She wasn't standing in a scrapyard. She was standing in the first place that had ever felt like home. A place where nobody asked her to become smaller. A place where her mind mattered. A place where she had been allowed to start over. She looked at Rafe. "Then I guess I'd better stay." He smiled. "And this time?" She smiled back. "And now, my dear friends, before we say goodnight, I want to ask you something. Have you ever stayed somewhere that no longer felt safe? Simply because you were afraid to begin again? Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we discover that the place we feared most is not the unknown, but the life we were settling for. If Claire's story touched your heart tonight, please leave a comment and let me know you're here. I read your messages more often than you might think. And if you enjoy these stories of courage, healing, and second chances, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our little family story corner. Until next time, take good care of yourselves, hold close the people who make you feel safe, and remember, it's never too late to start over. Sweet dreams, my friends.